Do you ever think you know someone until the truth hits like a storm you never saw coming? Because that's exactly what happened to me. The day my uncle stood in our farmhouse kitchen, looked me dead in the eye and said, "This land is mine now." I laughed at first. I mean, who claims someone else's farm with a straight face, right? But the way he said it, calm, cold, it sent a chill straight through me. See, this farm wasn't just dirt and fences. It was my childhood. It was Grandma's heartbeat, and suddenly it felt like everything she'd built was slipping away into his hands. He waved some old papers around like they were the holy truth. Said Grandma promised it to him, but something in my gut whispered, no, that's not how she would have done it. And I was right. Because a week later, buried in a box under her sewing table, I found a letter. Grandma's last words. And let me tell you, once that seal broke, everything changed. Beat. So before I tell you what was written in that letter, hit that subscribe button, because this story, it doesn't end the way you think it does. You know, when I think about it now, it's almost funny. Not in a ha-ha way, but in that bitter, life has a twisted sense of humor kind of way. Because for most of my life, I thought my family was solid. We weren't rich, but we had something better. Roots. Grandma's farm wasn't just land, it was the glue that held us all together. Every fence post, every worn-out tractor seat had a memory tied to it. I grew up chasing chickens, stealing apples from the orchard, and watching Grandma hum gospel songs while hanging laundry under the sun. That woman had hands rougher than bark, and a heart softer than heaven itself. And then there was Uncle Ray. He was charming. The kind of man who could talk his way through a thunderstorm and walk out dry. People liked him. I did too, until I learned charm can hide a lot of poison. He moved back to town after years of being too busy for family. Said he wanted to help out on the farm. Grandma welcomed him with open arms. She always did. But I noticed little things. The way he looked at the land. The way he asked questions about the deeds, the bank, the property taxes, and the way Grandma's eyes would drop every time he mentioned ownership. I remember one night after dinner, she pulled me aside. She said, "Honey, people change when there's land and money involved. Don't ever let the soil blind you to what's real." At the time, I didn't get it. I just smiled and nodded like a fool. But that sentence, those words, became the echo that guided me later. See, Uncle Ray had this habit of calling the farm ours. First it was a joke, then it became his share, then his legacy. And every time he said it, something in my chest tightened. I could see the writing on the wall. Greed was growing roots faster than Grandma's crops ever did. Still, I believed in family. I believed Grandma had everything sorted, just like she always did. Turns out, I was half right. Because while she did have a plan, none of us were ready for what that plan would reveal, especially Ray. And that's where things started to shift. Not in the daylight, but in the quiet corners of the house, where whispers began to sound a lot like threats. Grandma's health started fading that winter. It began with her slowing down. Less time in the garden, more time sitting by the window just watching the fields. She said the wind spoke to her more than people did. I didn't understand then. But maybe she saw what was coming before any of us did. Uncle Ray, of course, stepped up like some kind of hero. He drove her to appointments, brought her groceries, even started fixing things around the house. Everyone thought it was sweet. Finally, Ray was being responsible. But I could tell something was off. He wasn't helping. He was positioning. Every visit, every errand, every "let me handle that, Mom," was a step in some invisible plan. And soon enough, he started changing the tone around the house. He'd drop comments at dinner like, "You know, Mom always said I'd take over when she's gone." Or, "This place needs someone who understands business, not just memories." It was subtle, but sharp enough to cut. One night I caught him in Grandma's study, the one she kept locked. He was flipping through her old drawers like he owned the place. When he saw me, he smiled. That fake salesman kind of smile. And said, Just looking for the insurance papers, kid. Don't be so jumpy. That night I couldn't sleep. The whole house felt wrong. The ticking clock, the creaking floors. Everything sounded like secrets trying to get out. And then, the real blow hit. Grandma had a fall. Not a big one, but enough to shake everyone up. After that, Uncle Ray insisted she move the property paperwork for safety. He claimed he'd keep them organized. Yeah, organized. That's what thieves do before they take something. A week later, I overheard him on the phone, whispering about selling the southern lot to some investor. That's when I realized he wasn't waiting for Grandma to pass. He was preparing. I confronted him, and I'll never forget what he said. You're too young to understand how things work. This place will drown you in debt. Let me handle it. Grandma wanted me to have it anyway. He said it so calmly, like it was already decided. For a moment, I almost believed him. That's the thing about manipulation. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it sounds like reason. But the look in Grandma's eyes that night told a different story. She wasn't confused. She wasn't weak. She was waiting. Almost like she knew this was his final test. I didn't know it then, but that test, and the secret she left behind, would change every single thing we thought we knew about this family. And when that letter finally surfaced, let's just say Uncle Ray's confidence didn't last long after that. When Grandma passed, the house went quiet in a way I can't explain. It wasn't just silence, it was emptiness. The kind that hums inside your chest and doesn't stop. We buried her under the big oak by the west field, her favorite spot. She always said the tree had old souls living in it. Maybe she became one of them. Everyone was grieving, but Ray, he was busy. Busy on calls, busy in the study, busy being in charge. Within days, he changed the locks on Grandma's office, said it was for security. But we both knew what it really was. Control. He even showed up one morning with a banker and some legal guy in a slick gray suit. They sat in the kitchen, Grandma's kitchen, spreading out papers and talking in whispers. When I asked what was going on, he said, just routine stuff. You wouldn't understand. And then came the real shock. He produced a folder with a deed, a copy of one. He claimed it proved the farm was already transferred to him years ago. It looked official, but something about it didn't feel right. Grandma had told me once, important things don't live in folders, sweetheart. They live in faith and handwriting, and this deed had neither. That night I sat alone in the dark, staring out at the fields. The wind rustled through the corn like whispers, and for the first time, I felt afraid of losing not just the land, but the history behind it. Days passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandma had left something, some kind of message. She was a planner, the kind of woman who labeled cookie jars and wrapped birthday gifts months early. She wouldn't have left without setting things right. So I started searching. Quietly. While Ray played his game downstairs, I began mine upstairs. Old closets, shoe boxes, drawers filled with the smell of lavender and thyme. And then one evening, as the rain tapped on the windows, I found it. A small wooden box, hidden beneath a pile of old quilts in her sewing room. The lid was carved with her initials, ML. Inside, there were photos, a few rings, and a sealed envelope. It was yellowed with age, but her handwriting, that perfect cursive, was clear as day. To be opened when the truth becomes too loud to ignore. I swear, my heart stopped. I didn't open it right away. I just held it, shaking, staring, wondering if I even wanted to know what was inside. Because sometimes truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it burns down everything that came before it. I hid the envelope that night. Didn't tell a soul. Ray was getting pushier, talking about listing the property, hiring workers, modernizing the farm. He spoke like it was already his. But every time he said, "My land," I'd touch that envelope in my pocket, and my pulse would quicken. I didn't have proof yet, but I had something better. Hope. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about loyalty, legacy, and the kind of love that refuses to die quietly. So the next morning, Before sunrise, I made a decision. If Grandma left me that letter, she meant for me to use it. Whatever was written inside, it was time for the truth to come home. But I had no idea that once I broke that seal, the entire story of our family, and who we really were, would never be the same again. It was early morning when I finally opened Grandma's letter. The sky was gray, like the world itself was holding its breath. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd served pie and stories for 50 years, and stared at that envelope like it might explode. My hand shook as I tore it open. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and old books, her scent, and then her handwriting. That looping, patient script that always looked like it knew more than it said. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and I know what Ray has done, or tried to do. My throat tightened. She knew. Every word after that hit harder than the last. I raised both of you with love, but I've watched greed grow where gratitude used to be. This farm was never about money. It was about roots, about honor, about keeping what's sacred in safe hands. That's why I made my choice long ago. I swallowed hard, scanning the next line. And my world stopped. The farm belongs to you, not to Ray, not to the family, to me. And just like that, everything Ray had built his lies on, everything he had whispered, everything he had stolen, collapsed in a single sentence. The letter continued. I left the real deed in the safety box under my sewing machine. If he finds it first, he'll try to destroy it, but I trust you to protect what matters. Not for power, but for peace. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear hit the page. Grandma, from beyond the grave, had handed me the truth like a torch in the dark. But I didn't have time to process it, because just then I heard footsteps. Ray. He walked in like he owned the place, still half asleep, holding his coffee. When he saw the letter in my hand, he froze. His face went pale, the kind of pale that only comes from guilt meeting daylight. "What's that?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, and for the first time, he looked nervous. I slid the letter across the table slowly. He read a few lines, and his mask cracked. "That's not real," he stammered. She was old, confused, but his voice shook. The man who had strutted around this house like a king was suddenly cornered by a few lines of ink. I stood up. "She wasn't confused," I said. "She was watching. And now everyone's going to know what she saw." His eyes darted around, calculating. Then, desperate, he lunged toward the envelope. I was faster. The chair scraped back, papers flew, and the letter nearly tore. But I held it tight, and in that moment, I saw something I'd never seen in him before. Not arrogance, not charm, but fear. That was the real Ray. He backed away, muttering something about lawyers and proof, but it didn't matter. The proof was in my hands, and Grandma's truth had already burned its way through the lies. Later that day, I found the safety box she mentioned, tucked neatly beneath her sewing machine, right where she said it'd be. Inside was the real deed, signed, dated, witnessed, her name. My name, no one else's. I laughed, not out of joy, but relief, the kind that comes after months of holding your breath. Ray never came back to the house after that. Guess the truth was a little too heavy for him to carry. But me? I walked out to the fields that evening, letter in one hand, deed in the other. The sun broke through the clouds, and for a moment, I swear I could feel her beside me. The warmth, the peace, the quiet approval. Grandma's final words echoed in my mind. Some things aren't inherited by blood. They're earned by heart. And I finally understood. This farm wasn't just mine. It was ours. Her legacy. My promise. After that morning, everything felt still. Like the air around the house had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Ray didn't speak to me for days. Not a word. Not even a glance. He packed his things quietly, one night before dawn, and drove off in that old pickup Grandma had given him years ago. Funny how he took her truck, but left her truth. I watched from the porch as the taillights disappeared down the road. For the first time in months, I didn't feel anger. I just felt done. Like the storm had passed, and what was left wasn't destruction, but clarity. The next morning, I went into town. I brought Grandma's letter and the real deed to her lawyer. The same man who'd handled her will decades ago. He looked at the papers, adjusted his glasses, and said, "Your grandmother was sharper than all of us combined. This deed is airtight." That's when it hit me. She'd known exactly what she was doing all along. She'd seen through the lies before they were even spoken. Within a week, the county records were updated. The farm was legally mine. Ray tried one last swing, filed a claim through some attorney of his. But the letter destroyed his argument before it even reached a hearing. Case closed. And just like that, the man who once claimed ownership had nothing left but his own silence. I thought that would feel like victory, but standing there on the land, with Grandma gone and the fields quiet, it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. Because the truth is, no one really wins in family wars. Even justice can leave a scar. I spent the next few months restoring what had fallen apart. The fences, the fields, the peace, and slowly, it started feeling like home again. Not a battlefield, not a memory, but home. One evening, I was fixing the barn door when I found something else. A small tin box tucked behind the beams. Inside, just a folded note in Grandma's handwriting. "If you're reading this, you've done the right thing. Don't let anger grow where love once lived." I laughed through the tears. It was like she was still here, still teaching, still keeping me from letting bitterness take root. A few weeks later, Ray called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said, "Closure deserves a voice." His tone was different. No pride, no arrogance, just a tired man. "You won," he said. I paused, then told him the truth. "No, Ray, Grandma did." There was silence. Then he hung up. And that was the last time I ever heard from him. Now every time the wind moves through these fields, I think about everything that happened. And I realize, Grandma didn't just leave me a farm. She left me a lesson. Some inherit money. Some inherit power. But the lucky ones, they inherit wisdom. The kind that can't be bought, stolen, or signed away. And that, right there, was her real gift. It's been months since everything ended. The air around the farm feels different now. Lighter, almost like it remembers how to breathe again. Every morning, I sit on the porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise spill across the fields Grandma loved so much. It's quiet, but it's the kind of quiet that heals. Sometimes when the wind moves through the tall grass, I can almost hear her voice. Soft, steady, and sure. Protect what matters, not for pride, but for peace. Back then, I didn't understand how deep those words really went. Now I do. This land wasn't just about soil and fences. It was about truth. And the truth, no matter how buried, no matter how delayed, always finds its way home. I used to think revenge was about getting even, about watching the person who hurt you fall apart. But Grandma taught me something better. Revenge isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's preservation. It's standing tall while the storm rages, knowing you didn't lose yourself in the process. Ray's gone now. Sold his house, moved 2 towns over. Maybe he's starting over. Maybe he's still blaming me. Either way, I don't carry that weight anymore. Because this land isn't about who wins. It's about who remembers. A few nights ago, I lit a lantern by the oak tree where we buried Grandma. I placed her letter there, the one that started it all, not to say goodbye, but to say thank you. The glow flickered in the dark, and for a second I saw her, smiling, hands folded, that same calm she always had when life got complicated. And I realized something. We spend so much time fighting over what's ours. We forget that some things are only ever meant to be borrowed. Love, legacy, land. They're all just things we take care of until it's someone else's turn. So, if you've made it this far into my story, remember this. Greed might build walls, but truth builds roots. And those roots, they'll hold you steady long after everyone else has walked away. This farm, this land, this truth. It's mine now. Not because I fought for it, but because I earned it the way Grandma wanted. With heart. So take that as you will. And if life ever tries to take what's yours, Just remember, sometimes the strongest revenge is simply standing your ground.